How's it, guys? This is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, we'll be talking about the Game Week 30 preview. Talking points covered in this video, we're going to start off with the double Game Week 32 that was newly announced. We're then going to go into more conventional preview questions such as the watch list. Also going to be looking at a Bruno Fernandes versus Mohamed Salah debate. And then finally, before we talk about captaincy, we're also going to be looking at some one-week punts for those of you who are on that Game Week 31 wildcard. So that's something you're interested in. Sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So the first talking point we're going to be going over is the watch list. Now the watch list, as most game weeks, isn't looking at players that I'm going to be looking at for game week 30 per se. It's actually players that I'm currently monitoring the situation on to depend on if I either take them out in terms of Gareth Bale or I look to bring them in for Game Week 31's wildcard. So the first off position, as I mentioned, Gareth Bale there. I'm potentially looking at taking Gareth Bale out after a really weird blank Game Week 29. I mean, we brought him in thinking that he was going to have a really good game for Spurs against Aston Villa, but he didn't even come off the bench. I thought if he was benched, he'll come off for at least the last 20 or 30 minutes and he might even be able to get a return, but no, that wasn't the case, and that puts us in a really weird situation right now. I don't really know what the situation with Gareth Bale and Jose Mourinho is at the moment. I mean, we've had some weird comments coming out of Gareth Bale this week saying that the plan is to go back to Real Madrid at the end of the season, and that's not really too positive towards a Spurs kind of a talking point. The nice thing about Gareth Bale though is that he did play a lot of minutes in the international break, so that kind of negates that debate about his match fitness, as it shows that Gareth Bale can play a couple of matches within a small space of time. The only thing is that I don't think with the current gameplay that Gareth Bale tends to do, he doesn't really drop back on the defense, and it seems like Jose Mourinho really wants him to, and that's kind of leading to some conflicting opinions of Gareth Bale and Jose Mourinho. So as I said, real weird situation because Spurs do have that double game week and Game Week 32. So do we keep him for that double? Do we think he's going to come back in Game Week 30 or 31? That's yet to be seen. So Gareth Bale currently monitoring the situation. I mean, maybe Mourinho comes out in the press conference this week and says that Gareth Bale is definitely going to start against Newcastle in Game Week 30, and then I'll be quite happy because at least I can keep him. But do we take him out? Do we keep him? If you guys do have Gareth Bale, drop him down in the comments below what you're doing with the Welsh winger for Game Week 30. And then going on to the other two players. Firstly, Jack Grealish. We finally have some training pictures of Jack Grealish. We mentioned before the international break that the manager came out and said that Jack should be back after the international break. So now that we have had some training pictures, some social media posts from Grealish himself, I'm pretty sure that he'll be ready to go against Fulham in Game Week 30. So I'm keeping my eyes on him, not only for a Jack Grealish point of view, but also from an Aston Villa point of view, because if he's back in the squad, not only from an attacking point of view, but also from a defensive point of view, Aston Villa are a better side. He just kind of brings that energy to that Aston Villa side, so I'm expecting them to improve, and maybe other options like a Martinez or an Ollie Watkins we could still look at since his return. And then finally, we got Diogo Jota after a really good international break for Portugal, and that only kind of adds to his form right now. And as I always mentioned, the most informed player from an attacking point of view for Liverpool, so I do expect him to continue to start, but the thing is, Firmino's back from his injury. We've got to look out for that. Remember, he had a knee injury before the international break, so that's kind of why Diogo Jota was starting the couple last games, so it's going to be interesting to see if that continues. I'm expecting him still to start, but I really want to know that he's guaranteed to start because I want him to kind of cover Mo Salah at a really reduced price there. So all three of these members, not really looking to bring them in for Game Week 30 per se, but I still am looking at this current situation for that Game Week 31 wildcard or just for some free transfers in general. So now moving on to the big talking point that was announced yesterday. I'm recording this video on Wednesday afternoon, so you guys do have the freshest news here. But double Game Week 32 has been confirmed for Spurs. A little bit of a weird one. We don't usually have only one team having a double game week, but what's happened is that Crystal Palace are not going to be having a fixture in Game Week 32, and that's kind of been added to Spurs category. Now Spurs do play Southampton and Everton. Southampton's probably the fixture that you guys are going to be targeting because I think from a defensive point of view, probably the worst of those two. But that's the thing with Everton, they are a little bit hit or miss sometimes defensively, and I am expecting this to be quite a good double for those Spurs options. So this kind of changes quite a bit, but in my opinion doesn't change a lot in terms of the strategy. I'm going to first start off talking about the chip strategy and how it changes for you guys. The first one I'm going to be talking about is the triple captain, because a lot of people have been asking me if they still have the triple captain, when should they use it? So I think this is a really good opportunity to use that triple captain because in the previous couple double game weeks, Kane and other options haven't really performed that well. So yes, you're not going to be getting that differential aspect of the triple captain that we always talk about, because I think everyone and their dog is going to be captaining Harry Kane or Heung-min Son in double game week 32. So obviously you don't get that differential aspect, but I still think that he should hopefully return more than the goal in the last double game week. So anything more than a goal, you're going to be happy about. So I would consider using it in this double game week 32. There are going to be a couple of other double game weeks coming up, but I don't think it's going to present as good of an opportunity as Harry Kane and a Spurs side without any European commitments. Remember that they were knocked out of the Europa League, so they don't have any European football in the midweeks. Only that League Cup final and game week 33, which is going to be that next big blank. So maybe you have to watch out that from a minutes point of view, but I think that Harry Kane and Heung-min Son should be getting most out of those 180 minutes. So I would consider using that. In terms of the wild card now, I don't think it changes too much for our wild card. I mean, we made a wild card draft for game week 30 before this news was announced, and we already incorporated Harry Kane. So now you just have to incorporate Heung-min Son. In terms of the players that you should be looking at, I think that 2 players for double game week 32, 2 Spurs options is perfectly adequate. I don't think you necessarily have to go out there and break the bank, bring in 3 options. I mean, from a defensive point of view, there's been quite a bit of rotation in that Spurs backline. So you kind of have to predict who's going to be starting in their defense, and that's going to be quite a hard thing to do over a double game week. So I would just stick to the 2 conventional picks, Heung-min Son and Harry Kane. You go a little bit differential there if you want to go for someone like a Lucas Moura maybe, or even a Lamela if you want to go out there. But I think 2 players is perfectly fine for that double, and 2 options is perfectly fine for a wild card as well. So nothing really changes in my wild card plan unless you guys want to go super differential and maybe bring in another Spurs option in a defensive or an attacking position. So that's basically it on this double game week 32. Not too much to talk about. It's a little bit of a smaller double game week, but I still think it's going to enable us to get some more potential if you guys manage to hold on to those Spurs options. It's a little bit annoying if maybe you lost a Heung-min Son or a Harry Kane and now you have to bring them back in, because I do think there's a couple of other fixture swings for other opposition teams that do look quite good. So that's enough about double game week 32. Let's get on to another interesting talking point in terms of the doubles. And that interesting talking point is going to be revolving around the end of the season. So I've just gone and highlighted double game week 38 here. It might not be double game week 38. It might be anywhere from game week 35 to 38. But the main thinking behind this is that the UK government have come out and said that they want to return fans to the stadiums at the end of the season. And why they want to do this is that they want to have a home fixture for every single team in the Premier League towards the end of the season. And as you know, in every single game week, only half the teams are playing at home and the rest of the teams are playing away. And sometimes you have 2 away fixtures in a row, sometimes you have 2 home fixtures in a row. So what this has caused is this has caused an absolute carnage at the end of the season if this were to take place, because now the fixtures have to be repostponed, they have to be readjusted, and it might lead to some massive double game weeks towards the end of the season. And why I'm highlighting this is that with the second wild card still in our back pocket, it's kind of leading me to maybe want to use that wild card towards the end of the season and target those double game weeks, but yet we don't know if it's actually going to be confirmed now. I mean, imagine another spike happens and then suddenly the UK government retracts this and says that no fans are allowed in the stadium till only after the season, or maybe only towards the beginning of next season, and then we miss out on using that wild card to target these fixture swings of opposition teams that we've already covered. I mean, just think about it. We've covered a video on the best fixtures from now to the end of the season already, so imagine using all that kind of knowledge and all that research and throwing it down the drain to target fixtures that we don't even know are going to happen. So that's kind of the dilemma I'm in currently. I wanted to cover this point to give you guys my kind of thinking behind the wild card and whether you guys should be using it now in game week 31 or maybe later in the season. And it kind of all comes down to, should we use it on confirmed fixtures right now or kind of chase a dream of a potential double game week being an absolutely massive double game week later in the season. But I just kind of wanted to plant the seed here for you guys, and if we do get news about it throughout the week, I will obviously update you guys as soon as possible. Now going on to the big comparison of this video, it's going to be Salah versus Bruno Fernandes. And I know we've spoken about this talking point throughout the season many times, but it's come up yet again, mainly due to that wild card in game week 30 or that wild card in game week 31. With Harry Kane now having the double and Heung-min Son, and you're still wanting a player like Kevin De Bruyne, you guys might not have the team value to fit a Mo Salah or a Bruno Fernandes in your wildcard drafts, or just in general. I mean, if you have your free transfers, maybe you want to bring in Bruno Fernandes or Mo Salah, who should you bring in? So what I've done is I'm going to be doing a complete comparison here from the stats to the fixture to the other talking points. Starting with the stats, I've gone over to Fantasy Football Hub and I've done the usual stats comparison. I think the stats generally look a little bit better for Mo Salah in blue there, and then Bruno Fernandes is in red. So Mo Salah has the better chances in terms of shots in the box, big chances. But the thing with Bruno Fernandes is that he does offer more assisting threat. I mean, those key passes might not have turned into expected assists, and generally Mo Salah and Bruno Fernandes have the same amount of expected assists. But I just think that Bruno Fernandes is a bit more consistent in terms of those returns, and that's why why he scored the most FPL points in that midfield department this FPL season. So I think from a stats point of view, it's a bit tough here. I think that I have to give it slightly towards Mo Salah just because there's more shots in the box, there's more big chances, and hopefully more FPL points come out of that. But I still think you have to take into consideration that assisting threat that Bruno Fernandes does offer. The next talking point we're going to be going over is coverage. I mean, with Mo Salah, we've seen with a Diogo Jota right now that he's currently covering Mo Salah or outperforming him at a price practically half the price of Mo Salah. And then you look at Bruno Fernandes. I don't really think there's a Manchester United attacker that I really think can cover the Portuguese midfielder, and that's why it's always been that main talisman for United. So that's why with Salah, we can cover him with maybe other Liverpool attackers, but with Bruno Fernandes, he's always involved in those attacks, so I don't really think we can do that, and that's a big talking point to go over if you guys are considering this debate. Finally, we're going to be talking about the fixtures, and I think this is where it kind of leads into my mind. As you know, I'm always kind of a more fixture prone manager than maybe other FPL managers around, but in terms of the fixtures, I think that Liverpool and Mo Salah have the better fixtures here, especially from that run from about game week 31 to about game week 35 or 36 when these two face each other. You can see that Aston Villa in game week 31, then playing Leeds and Newcastle afterwards, whereas Bruno Fernandes goes and faces Spurs, Burnley and Leeds. I think that Leeds fixture is going to be one to target for both these sides, as I think it should be quite open and quite a high scoring game. But the thing with the fixtures as well that you have to consider, and probably is going to be the overall kind of decider between these two players, is going to be your captaincy debate. And if you look at Mo Salah, I think I'll captain him in more game weeks than I do Bruno Fernandes. So in that game week that Bruno Fernandes faces Leeds, Mo Salah faces Newcastle. So that could be an equal opportunity to captain Mo Salah over Bruno Fernandes, and that's where it kind of decides it for me that I would probably comfortably captain Mo Salah in more game weeks than I would Bruno Fernandes in the upcoming game weeks. In game week 30, that's probably the only game week that I really would consider Bruno Fernandes more than Mo Salah, just because Mo Salah faces Arsenal, whereas Bruno goes home to Brighton. So that's one of the things you have to consider. If it's a short-term move, maybe look at Bruno Fernandes more, but if it's a long-term move, I think that Mo Salah could be quite good. And that's the thing about the ownership. Bruno Fernandes is owned by more people. I know that both these players are quite highly owned, so if you want to go for more safety option and you're happy with your rank, you don't want to go too differential, then maybe stick with a Bruno Fernandes. But I definitely think from a differential point of view that Mo Salah, Diogo Jota double up instead of just going for Diogo Jota as a cover might be more profitable in the upcoming game weeks. So the last talking point we're going to be going over before we talk about Captaincy is going to be on 1 week punts, and the reason behind this is that if we are going to be using a wild card in game week 31, game week 30 provides a nice opportunity to go for maybe an outright pick there, maybe a more differential pick that hopefully will get us some returns. So I literally could have highlighted 4 Chelsea players here, but I think that would be a little bit too boring, so I've gone for 2 more differential picks from Chelsea, maybe a little bit different to the more conservative options, but I do think these 2 players could return well. The first one is going to be Marcus Alonso. At 2.5% ownership, the Chelsea fullback has found a new place at home in that starting lineup with the new Chelsea manager, and I think that we've seen that he likes to play a more attacking fullback when they face more defensive or worse sides. So it's a similar situation with Man City when they've played sides that park the bus more generally. Then you see someone like a João Cancelo rather play. Pep Guardiola usually likes a more attacking fullback just so they can get those crosses and those more attacking threats against those low block sides. So I think that Alonso should play against West Bromwich Albion at home, and the thing about Alonso as well is that he didn't go on international break with Spain, so he wasn't picked for that squad. He's had a nice long rest here over this international break where he's been training at the Chelsea training ground, so I think that he should start against West Bromwich Albion, and I am pretty confident in it. And just with Marcus Alonso, I mean, you know from previous seasons that you've played FPL that from an attacking point of view, there's not many defenders that are better from an attacking point of view than Marcus Alonso. There's also that heading threat that he always offers from the set pieces, which could be a nice little enabler for some attacking returns against West Brom. So I think Alonso, definitely I would look at him. If you are looking at a 1 week punt but more for a long-term option and not really a 1 week punt at all, then maybe Azpilicueta could be a better option for you. Around the same price as Alonso, but I think a little bit more nailed in that lineup. But in terms of a 1 week punt, it's got to be Marcus Alonso, and you could even look at him from a captaincy point of view. Then the next midfielder from Chelsea, we're going to be looking at Havertz. I say midfielder, but in the last fixture, he did play as a false 9 in that Chelsea lineup. So a little bit of an interesting one there. I had a good game actually, not in terms of his finishing and his kind of points returns, but in terms of the eye test, he definitely passed it. Got a lot of chances, a lot of stats from that false 9 position, look quite good. Now whether he starts in that false 9 or more of a cam position is yet to be seen. Whether he even starts at all is yet to be seen. But I do think that he's also found a new place in that starting 11 under the new Chelsea manager, and I do have faith in him. I mean, 2.8% ownership, can't really go wrong in that one. I don't think I'd captain Havertz per se, but I still think he might be worth just kind of filling in a starting 11 position in your FPL sides. The next 2 players might be a little bit more conventional. It's starting off with Jack Grealish. I mean, 17.5% ownership for Jack Grealish, a player of his quality, is still quite low. I know they face Fulham, a side that's been better defensively and overall since the start of the season, but I mean, it is Jack Grealish. Kind of score or assist against anyone. So I still would maybe be looking at him as a 1 week punt, and then maybe just assess the situation with Aston Villa and see if you keep him for the upcoming game weeks. And then finally, we got Serge Aurier. Now, Serge Aurier depends on quite a few factors. The main one being that the Spurs fullbacks currently have quite a few knocks. So I think Doherty, I think Davies, I think Reguilon all have knocks. These might be international break knocks, and you know what I'm talking about there. It's just kind of the player coming out and say they're injured so they don't have to go on the international break. But if these are kind of concrete injuries, and maybe Mourinho comes out in the press conference and says that they still are injured, then I think Serge Aurier provides a nice little alternative there. With Callum Wilson maybe returning for this game, from a defensive point of view, maybe not the best fixture, but I think it is Newcastle, a side that's been pretty dire from an attacking point of view without those mainstay players with those injuries. So if Wilson is still out for the Spurs game, I'd definitely be looking at Serge Aurier, granted those other players are still injured. From an attacking point of view, still offers a little bit, so I still would be looking at him just because I think that fixture for Spurs is looking quite good. Now going on to Captaincy, and Captaincy this week is probably going to be a little bit more cut and dry than previous game weeks. It's going to be simply Harry Kane or bust, I reckon. And in terms of bust, I don't mean they're not going to return, but I think that most people generally will go for the English striker, and I think his ownership is going to be quite high there. Now that doesn't mean that he's the best option. I think that just means that he's going to be the most highly capped option. You could also go for maybe a Human Son if you think the game's going to be a little bit more open, but I think this game should be quite a Harry Kane game, and I don't think it's going to be too counter-attacking. So I don't think we'll be looking at Human Son in terms of that kind of play style. So Harry Kane, most highly capped player. Bruno Fernandes also offers a nice little alternative against Brighton. Ownership also quite high. I think more people will probably just captain Kane if they own both these players, but I still think that Bruno Fernandes could be in there with a shout. And then the final player, I've gone for Marcos Alonso here, not because I think he's the best Chelsea option to captain, just because I wanted to talk about him in my own FPL side. If I do bring in Marcos Alonso, it's going to be quite tempting to go for the capture on him, just because I think from an attacking and a defensive point of view, he's got quite a lot of returns in there, and I think he's one of the most likely players to return in game week 30. So I've highlighted Marcos Alonso here as a more of a differential. If you guys want to make it up the ranks, catch up in your mini leagues, definitely look at a Chelsea option because I think that fixture looks quite tasty. Now going on to the Fantasy Football Hub predictor tool, we've gone for our 5 top options there, predicted to score the most points. Obviously, first off, we're going to go with Kane there, 6.1 points, highest predicted scorer, so a pretty comfortable captain. I mean, if he's got a good ownership, he's got a good predicted score for the upcoming game week, generally that leads to quite a good return. So Harry Kane number 1 there, Fernandes second position with 5.2, and then we go to the Chelsea assets. We've got Mount and we've got Werner. I think Mount is a good option to consider just because of how well he's been playing recently, and I think in terms of that starting 11, one of the most assured starters in my opinion. So you could look at a Mason Mount if you want to go from a team of Werner as well. Just be cautious of that rotation, so maybe as long as your vice captain is on a safety pick, then you should be fine. And then finally, we've got that Mo Salah against Arsenal. So this is basically a wrap for the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like it if you did, and subscribe if you have not subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow for an updated wildcard draft, and then on Friday for the team selection going into that game week 30 deadline. I'm signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.